Hello and welcome to Week 11 of Jets Final Drive. I'm your host, Jeane Coakley, and like always, I am joined by SNY NFL insider Connor Hughes. Connor, welcome back. You missed last week because you were off covering another team. And then today we are joined by Joe Caporoso of Turn on the Jets and Badlands podcast. Joe, did I say it right this time?
You said it right. You nailed it. All the vowels in there is perfect.
Perfect. No A.
Like Caporoso.
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 Right? Yeah.
Yeah, I do that little thing for it. All right, well, just a reminder, guys, before we get going, Jets Final Drive on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. All right, guys, the Jets fell to the Colts 28-27 in another last-minute loss where the defense fell apart and Aaron Rodgers and the offense were unable to get into field goal range with 40 seconds left in the fourth. All right, obviously, this whole season has been a struggle for Aaron Rodgers, but you bring in Rodgers to win games that come down to the final drive. So I'll start with you, Connor. Are you surprised he hasn't been able to run a successful 2-minute drill?
I am, yeah. Because I don't know what else the team needs. I mean, I feel like the past years it's always been, oh, this is the problem, fix this, it'll be fine, fix this, it'll be fine, fix this, it'll be fine. But yeah, Jeane, it's an issue. I mean, this is a guy in Aaron Rodgers that is a 4-time MVP, one of the best to ever live. And to see him fail in crunch time after time after time here, 0 for 4 on game-winning attempts in the fourth quarter. I guess if you want to technically give him one for the Titans game because the Jets went down and scored there on the play to Braylon Allen, but that touchdown came with 4 minutes, so it really was a defensive stand. But it's been alarming. It's been on the long list of things that has plagued this team. But ultimately, Jeane, this comes down to one thing. Bad teams find ways to lose football games. And right now, the Jets are what they are. They are a 3-8 bad football team that week in and week out is inventing ways to lose.
Joe, what about you? Are you surprised?
Unfortunately, not at this point. I think we've seen this movie and we've seen this game a few times this year. And just watching how the offense played in this game, especially with no timeouts, it was hard to be confident that Rodgers was going to push the ball down the field aggressively enough to get the Jets in field goal range. Everything that he's been doing is in like a 5-yard horizontal box. And when you need to get 40 or 50 yards in 50 seconds with no timeouts, we haven't seen anything yet this year that would make you optimistic he would come through in that situation. He just does not look like the same guy he did in week 3 against the Patriots. The arm strength doesn't seem to be there. The mobility isn't there. And the confidence isn't there, again, to throw the ball down the field. Everything is a speed out, a quick hitch, a quick slant. There is nothing vertical and there is no mobility, and that's hard to overcome.
And it was alarming too, Joe, cause that deep passing. I think he's 1 of 6 on passes over 10 yards or over 15 yards in the last 2 weeks, the only one being that 17-yard completion to Xavier Gibson on 3rd and 14. And that's not the Aaron Rodgers everyone has come to know. He's been the electric, the dynamic presence. And again, I don't expect him to run around like he used to when he was 23. I still thought he actually showed some mobility here against the Colts, specifically on that 3rd and 14 where he moved up in the pocket, escaped out right, found Gibson and hit him. It's just the lack of vertical routes that they continue to lack and just not display or not even take the chances of. And I asked Rodgers about it after the game, and he made a comment about cover 2. But, Joe, the Colts aren't the only team in the world that runs cover 2. The Jets aren't the only team in the league that sees a cover 2, and you still see teams being aggressive, attacking down the field, using vertical routes, finding explosive plays in spite of that. I mean, you don't think teams are playing the Cincinnati Bengals with Jamar Chase and T. Higgins in a cover 2? Like, yes, they are, and Joe Burrow still finds ways to make plays. So I just think it's a weak excuse, and maybe it is what you said. Maybe the arm strength isn't necessarily there, or Rodgers, who has dealt with so many issues from the waist down, whether it's the knee, the ankle sprain, coming back from the Achilles injury, maybe he just doesn't trust his base to plant and throw deep down the field. I don't know what it is, but it really is holding the Jets back.
Yeah, there's no good excuse when you have receivers like this as well. Garrett Wilson in particular, some of these weeks, it just feels like he's going to waste. Like, what was his route tree in this game? All he is running are these little hitches and screens. And I know he can run a little bit after the catch, but throw him a post route. Let him win down the sideline. He's done that when you've given him opportunities to do it. You have this Ferrari and you're treating him like a go-kart in this offense. And, Devontae had a decent game where he broke some tackles and ran a little bit, but even him, we saw this in the Houston game in the second half. They threw vertically to both Adams and Garrett Wilson, and it was the best their offense looked all year. That is what today's NFL is. They'll draw penalties if they're not going to catch it. You have to find a way to maximize the talent you have. Garrett Wilson could still play. Breece Hall could still play. Devontae Adams could still play. They showed it yesterday, but you have to get the ball down the field. Otherwise, they're just too easy to defend. And they still scored 27 points yesterday, even in spite of all that. And it was not a good game at all from Rodgers. They're lucky that Breece and Devontae, particularly Breece, made some plays. But through 11 games, the excuses just isn't there. It looks, and this isn't, again, like, I don't want to be unfair, but Rodgers is playing like a guy who's very worried about his completion percentage and not throwing interceptions and not taking risks and not trying to make plays down the field. And like, I don't care if his stats look okay on paper, 17 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, and a nice completion percentage. It doesn't matter if you're 3-8 and you can't beat the Colts and you lose by 30 to the Cardinals. It's just, there's no pop to the offense. If there's one thing I didn't expect, I thought they'd at least have an entertaining offense, even if it was erratic and they had turnovers. They're just dull to watch unless they're dumping the ball off to Breece Hall and he makes something happen.
Well, that was the first time all season that they scored more than 25 points, and they're the last team to do that this year. So there was a positive. They scored.
I got champagne downstairs. You want to pop it?
Yes.
You know what? We should actually after this season, Connor. All right,
Connor, we might be doing that in 2 weeks.
Yeah,
we got 6 more to go, my friend.
I know. If you have more than champagne, I need harder stuff than that, my friend. Anyways, Connor, you wrote an article for SNY.TV after the game yesterday about Aaron Rodgers' future with the Jets, saying that the stability and continuity are going to be the QB's deciding factors on returning. So where does he stand with the organization at this point today?
Well, that's the thing, Jeane, is when he said – Aaron Rodgers is a very literal person, and it's one of the things I actually really enjoy about covering him is because he's never going to do what Brian Daboll just did on this conference call after the Giants benched Daniel Jones and dance around questions, not answer questions. You can throw him fastball, curveball, knuckleballs. He's going to go at every single one of them and be honest with everything he says. But what you ask him, he's also going to answer literally. So when Brian asked him last week, do you still want to play in 2005? And he said, I think so, yes. He was answering that question literally. He wants to play football in 2025. What he did not say is, I want to play football for the Jets no matter what. So I just dug a little bit this week. I tried to figure out what exactly was going on. And from my understanding, a lot of what he wants to do next year in 2025, specifically as it pertains to the Jets, again, it comes down to, like you said, like I wrote, it's continuity and stability specifically on the coaching and management levels of this organization, which makes a lot of sense because think about why Aaron Rodgers came to the Jets in the first place, guys, right? He came here because Nathaniel Hackett was here. He didn't want to work with Matt LaFleur anymore. Matt LaFleur gave him a brand new scheme from what he was accustomed to. He challenged him in different ways. Now, we can say like, okay, well, being challenged and running the scheme that LaFleur did also resulted in the 2 best years of his career, but that's neither here nor there. What he wanted was what he knew. He wanted what he was comfortable with. It's why also he brought the players who he brought with him to the Jets. If they go and hire a new general manager after firing Joe Douglas, that means a brand new viewpoint on this roster. If they bring in a new head coach, he's not going to keep Nathaniel Hackett and Todd Downing. He's going to bring in a brand new offensive scheme. In all likelihood, it's going to be a scheme that is predicated on motions, which is where the NFL is going. At 41 years old, that is not something that anyone I've touched base with believes that Aaron Rodgers is going to sign up for to get himself involved in. And from my understanding as well, the Jets, in that situation where they have a new head coach and a general manager, the Jets would also prefer a new coach or a new quarterback as well. Now, again, that doesn't mean that Aaron Rodgers is going to retire. I do believe he will explore other opportunities to continue playing in 2005 where he can find that familiarity. But with the Jets, it really is tied to continuity and keeping a lot of the pieces in place, which right now that seems asinine. Right now that seems crazy. And ultimately, I do think there's like a 1.5-2% chance that there aren't wholesale changes within the organization. But the one caveat is Christopher Johnson because his relationship with Aaron Rodgers is real. It's legit, and maybe there is a chance that he can convince him to come back no matter what. But right now, I'd say those odds are not likely.
All right, Joel, do you want to see Aaron back in a Jets uniform next season?
I think at this point, it's hard not to lean towards no because the Jets need a new general manager. They need a new head coach. They need a new offensive coordinator. They need a new special teams coordinator. They need a whole new coaching staff and probably an actual proper VP of football operations to look at how their entire infrastructure is set up in the front office and just take a fresh approach on everything. And half measuring things is how the Jets got into this playoff drought and this mess, right? They fired Mike Tannenbaum but kept Rex Ryan. Now you're on different timelines. They didn't fire McCagnon and Bowles at the same time, so you're on different timelines. There's no scenario where you're not messing up the timelines here. You're going to have a brand new head coach, a brand new offensive coordinator, brand new GM, maybe another brand new person or two in the front office, and you're still going to have the holdover quarterback from the previous regime. It's just hard to see how that works. Now, you can make a counter argument and say, frame the right way, it's appealing that you get a year to try to compete with Rodgers, and then you could start fresh. That's a tough needle to thread, especially for the Jets when you've been as bad as they've been for a long time. It makes more sense, I think, overall and on paper, just to rip the Band-Aid off, start fresh completely from this regime. If Rodgers wants to play somewhere else, you could help facilitate that. I don't know exactly where he lines up to go next year, but you want to start everyone on the exact same timeline and not have any bleed over from a regime that got 6 years, and it just didn't work. And if Rodgers is on the team, he's going to be the center of the universe. He's Aaron Rodgers. He's the quarterback. How do you turn the page leadership-wise if Rodgers is still on the team? You can't count on your young players or other people to step into that role. It will be all about Aaron Rodgers. And that's just because of who he is. He's a Hall of Famer. He's a big personality. It feels like the timelines don't add up. And the only way it might have made sense, and you could have sold it, is if the Jets got hot down the stretch here. Okay, they won 5 of their last 7. There's signs of life. If we just look at the back half of the year, it's hard to see that happening. They feel like they don't even feel like a 7-10 team. They feel like a 4-13 team. And then how do you sell we went 4-13 when Rodgers played 15, 16, 17 games and we're going to do it again?
You can't, especially when he's looking as old as he is. But the one flip side of all of this, Joe, and it's like, okay, well, Aaron, yeah, it doesn't make sense for the Jets to bring him back. They're going to move on. There isn't necessarily a player here that they have invested significant capital in that they can turn around and say, like, okay, well, when Aaron leaves, this is the guy we're turning it over to. There's no Will Levis on this roster. The Jets' backup quarterback is 35-year-old Tyrod Taylor. So if it's not Aaron, who is it going to be? Now, in the situation you just listed where the Jets are going to win 4 games, 3 games, something like that, well, they're probably going to be picking top 5. They can be in the realm of potentially a Cam Ward, a Shedeur Sanders, something like that. One of these quarterbacks, Milroe, one of these guys who are going to be in there. Granted, not nearly as good of a position, a draft class as last year. I was talking to Connor Rodgers about that today. But still, you could theoretically draft your quarterback, find a veteran, move forward with the typical process that a lot of quarterback or teams do. However, if they do find a way to steal a game or two down the road, say they do win 6 games as opposed to 3 or 4, maybe they do get to 7 wins somehow, some way down the stretch because they do play some easier opponents. Who's the quarterback going to be? They're not going to go sign Sam Darnold. This free agent class, Russ Wilson's probably going back to the Steelers. Sam Darnold's not running it back with the Jets. Are you going to go sign Carson Wentz? Are you going to try it with Justin Fields, who this team already deemed wasn't worth it when they drafted Zach Wilson? I mean, Jacoby Brissett, there really aren't any quarterbacks that are going to be free agents to sign to come be the guy. There's no one really on the trade market unless they maybe can try to force Trevor Lawrence to shake free. And there really isn't going to be a player that they're worthy of drafting in the first round if they're picking, say, 10, 11, 12, just because of the sheer number of bad teams that are out there right now. So I hate to say it, and I hate to use the phrase, but you do get the sense that the Jets might be entering quarterback purgatory again, where there really isn't a clear-cut answer on what to do.
All right, let's move to defense. All right, we're moving to defense. We spent too much time talking about this offense, okay? I'm ready to move on. Aaron Rodgers, I'm done with.
Janae wants like the whiskey right now.
Exactly. I'm thinking vodka right now, okay? Not Aaron Rodgers. Yeah. All right. Connor, you've been defending Sauce Gardner all season, but his struggles have cost the Jets a few games this season. The latest being a broken down coverage on Colts Alex Pierce that resulted in that 39-yard big gain, which eventually led to the game-winning touchdown. So, Joe, I'm going to start with you, even though Connor's been defending Sauce. Let's start with you. Is the game script on how to beat him out, or are these just mental mistakes costing him?
I mean, I think it's a mix of both. Teams are clearly putting him in situations where he has to chase crossers, and he's having a hard time doing that. The Jets have very poor communication on their back end with all the zone that they're playing. They don't seem to know when to hand off players or not. And look, by the letter of the law, was that completion on Sauce? Probably not, but if you want to be the best corner and the highest paid corner in the NFL, do you maybe go off script and not hand Pierce off to a safety who's been on the team for 4 or 5 weeks? It's tough, and he has just not played to the standard that we saw over the first 2 years. Teams are making him tackle. Teams are making him run through traffic. And he's just not playing with the same confidence that he did in his first 2 years. He's not getting, more calls are going against him, although that wasn't an issue in the Colts game. But he just does not look like the elite player he was in the first 2 years. And the Jets defense they carry themselves with this sort of finger pointing mentality. As soon as there's a big completion, everyone's pointing at each other, and it's a mess. And it's a shame because he's not a rookie, right? He's in his third year. You kind of want him to be like, along with Rodgers, like the face of the franchise and the face of the defense. And it just hasn't happened this year. And look, he probably gets a little more blame than he should because there's a lot of other big problems on this defense, namely what they did to their defensive line in the offseason and how that's came together. But biggest star is going to get the most attention, and teams are coming after him now. And it's been jarring to see. And the Jets, for all their other issues, if you would have said before the year, Rodgers is going to be a disappointment, Sauce is going to be a disappointment, Tyron Smith is going to be a disappointment, Mosley's going to be hurt, and when he's out there, he's going to be a disappointment. Man, that's a lot to overcome. That's the top upper class of your roster that you were counting on to be stars, and there just haven't been stars this year.
Connor, what do you make of the defense as a whole?
They missed. The firing of Robert Saleh just had a resounding impact on that side of the ball. I think that people very much underestimated how much Robert had to do with the game plan. I think they underestimated how much Robert had to do with the defense. I do believe that Jeff Ulbrich is a very good defensive coordinator. I think he might someday be a great head coach. But there were also moments in every single game who Saleh, for all of his faults and what people want to rip him for, he got the head coaching job of the Jets for a reason. He was a dominant, one of the best defensive minds in the league when he was with the San Francisco 49ers. It was another defensive brain on the sideline. So when he would see things maybe in the first quarter or the first half or in the third quarter that were going a little wrong or notice something, he could go to Brick and say like, hey, maybe we should try this. Maybe tweak this. He never stepped on his toes, never called the plays for him, but just that other sounding board, that piece of advice could have those impact all over the place. And now the other obvious thing is that they have him run way too thin. And DJ Reed alluded to this in the locker room when we were talking to him after the game, Jeane. It's that you didn't promote Jeff Ulbrich to head coach and then find another defensive coordinator. You literally have him, who's never been a head coach before, ever. Like, it literally never has Jeff Ulbrich been a head coach before. You have him now being defensive coordinator and head coach, and you can tell he is pulled far too thin. And the Jets, that graphic there is just damning. That is just a damning figure. That tells the whole story, is that you went from a really good defense, top 5, top 10 unit, to now one that's probably bottom 5 in the entire league, and it's because you don't really have a coordinator now.
And Joe, you just heard Connor. DJ Reed said it. You heard what Connor just had to say. Has Ulbrich's stock dropped when viewed as a potential head coach around the league? Yeah. Or to front
I think so.
Kind of know that he was put in a real difficult situation?
I think he will be a defensive coordinator somewhere next year, or a very senior defensive assistant. But yeah, as a head coach, I don't see that happening for him anytime soon. It's going to take a while. He's going to have to go somewhere else, got to get away from this whole thing. And the Jets are, they're probably going to finish 2-whatever under his record. It's not going to be pretty. So unfortunately for him, he got the opportunity. It's not going to happen for him as being a head coach next year, but hopefully he'll get another chance being a defensive coordinator somewhere, which I think he will. He has a good body of work prior to that. The way the Jets are operating right now, I don't know. There's just some shell company energy across the board, right? They promote Ulbrich. They don't backfill his old role. They made a lot of changes in the front office in the offseason, but they didn't really directly backfill some of those roles. It just kind of feels like the last moments of a regime that, gave it a shot with Rodgers. They threw a Hail Mary post Zach Wilson. They completed that Hail Mary getting him here. The reality is that this Rodgers move and this Rodgers era and everything about it probably ended when he got hurt in the Buffalo game. That knocked off all the timelines. He got a little too old. And once he got hurt that early into that season, the ship probably sailed, even if we wanted to hope he could have one more really good year. So they were desperate for a quarterback. I was all for them going to try something extreme. They really had no choice by that phase of the tenure for Saleh and Douglas. It just didn't work. And for all these guys, I think it's going to be better for everyone, as many people as possible, to have a fresh start. There's still some really good talent here and some good building blocks. It's not like 2017 where the roster was completely barren post 2016. There are some pieces here, and Sauce should be better in a new situation with a new staff. And Quinnen and Brees have played better recently after slow starts. Garrett is still really good. Joe Tippmann's been good. There's been moments of things that are encouraging, but from like a leadership perspective, they got to start over. They tried it, just hasn't worked.
Yeah, and Connor, you mentioned when Saleh got fired, it kind of went downhill. But if you go all the way to the week 1, when did this go wrong?
For me, it was actually in the offseason, and it's when the Jets decided to just run it back with their offensive staff. Because if you have Robert Saleh still as this team's head coach, Jeff Ulbricht's the defensive coordinator, and the rest of the staff, I thought the Jets might take a step back from the defense. Just it's hard to have that much continued success on that side of the ball. But I thought they were still going to be, at worst, a top 12, still probably a top 10 unit across the league. In my opinion, where this thing went skewed was actually when the Jets identified a problem in the offseason. They made multiple attempts to go out there and add a senior offensive assistant to this staff. And that senior offensive assistant, he wasn't going to lead to Nathaniel Hackett getting fired. Hackett was still going to be the offensive coordinator, but this person was going to call the plays. And the reason why they pursued this candidate, Arthur Smith was the main one that they had atop their board. They had multiple conversations with him, was because this organization felt like Nathaniel Hackett had lost his fastball. That's a organization realizing after last year, we need a problem, or we have a problem, we need to fix this problem ASAP. When they weren't able to get Arthur Smith or any of the other guys that they ended up speaking to, they decided to just run it back with the belief that, yeah, Hackett might be a problem. He might not be the guy he once was, but don't worry, Aaron Rodgers is going to save us. Guys, this isn't baseball that you can run off of a spreadsheet. This isn't basketball where it's predominantly run by your star players being star players. Coaching matters in the NFL. And when you are at such a substantial, stark deficiency on the offensive side of the ball, the rest of it is just going to spiral out of control. And Todd Downing really hasn't been any better. And if you really want to go all the way back, it probably started getting derailed when the Jets moved on from Mike LaFleur. Because when they fired LaFleur, and I'm not talking about LaFleur as this premier, unbelievable, great offensive mind. His offense has struggled, not when anybody other than Zach Wilson was under center, but still, he was not a perfect offensive coordinator in any stretch of the imagination. But when they fired LaFleur, when the ownership stepped in and said, we need a change here, it is not working, Robert Saleh knew it was going to be near impossible to get anyone who was anyone in this building. He talked to people. They were not taking his interviews. He was trying. I think the one guy that did was Monken, but even then was like, dude, I'm not taking this job. I just kind of wanted to talk to you. They knew that no one was coming up when there were major concerns at quarterback. There were major concerns with job security, and it could have been a one and done. The only one that they were able to get was Nathaniel Hackett, and as soon as they got him in the building, they realized there was a problem, tried to replace him after year one, couldn't, ran it back, and you saw this offense just whoop-de-whoop-de-whoop-de-whoop all the way down. And the offensive line's better, the playmakers are better, Breece Hall is healthy, 4-time MVP under center, and it doesn't matter because coaching matters, and the Jets don't have it.
All right, well, Joe, then I'm going to throw it out there. Week 11, who's the Jets coach next year, week 1?
I will say Aaron Glenn ends up getting the job. And I know Jet fans are going to be like, oh my God, a defensive guy. It's Robert Saleh. Yeah, it's Robert Saleh. And I'm not being biased towards Glenn just because he was a former Jet, although I don't think it's the worst thing in the world to have someone who has some understanding of what this franchise is about. I just think Vrabel, it's going to be very competitive. I would like to see them be very aggressive to try to get Vrabel or Stefanski if Cleveland does a flip and keeps him. Going to be a lot of competition there. I don't know if Pete Carroll's coming here at 73 when he started his career here. Ben Johnson's not going to come here. They're not going to pay the money they need to for him. Monken's not going to come here after 2019. So Glenn, I think, is going to come from a team that could very well win a Super Bowl this year, that probably has the best culture in the entire sport, learned under Dan Campbell. And again, it could be an offensive coordinator, it could be a defensive coordinator. Being a head coach is a completely different job. So if he hires the right offensive staff, could that work? Sure. And I'm not standing on a table saying he's the best hire. The reality is it's coordinator roulette. All these cool names that everyone never heard of until 14 months ago, Liam Cohn, Zach Robinson, everything. We have no idea which one of these guys is going to be the next Adam Gase, Robert Saleh, or the next Sean McVay or next D'Amico Ryans. But Glenn, I could see as sort of like a higher second-tier candidate that they're able to get over the line. Can he get an offensive coordinator that is someone the Jet fans are excited about? I don't want to keep naming former Jets, but people also keep mentioning Josh McCown as a potential offensive coordinator coming out of his experience. That's where I would guess right now. But I think if you were doing like betting odds as of today, the top of your list is like a mix of Vrabel, Carroll, Glenn, all the names that you're hearing out there. There's going to be a decent amount of competition overall. So as of now, I'll say Aaron Glenn, just because I think that ends up being the approach that they go with.
All right, well, Connor,
I think Aaron Glenn.
Oh, you're going with you on?
Yeah, I think Aaron Glenn makes a lot of sense. I don't think Vrabel's happening. I don't think Ben Johnson is happening. Matt Nagy was the name that Costello threw out there the other day, and I know that caused absolute hysteria, but I talked to him about it in the media room, and his argument made a lot of sense.
It did. I talked to him too.
Yeah, Patrick Mahomes is going to make the call to Woody, and he's going to kind of say, like, hey, this is what could be this is going to look good. You know, kind of flash back to when it was Peyton Manning making the call. Andy Reid can vouch for him. Former head coach, did get the Bears to the playoffs with Trubisky, but the one that really stands out is Aaron Glenn. I don't think Pete Carroll's happening. I do not think Mike Vrabel's happening. He's going to have way too many suitors that he would come here. I think Aaron Glenn is the one that makes a lot of sense unless he ends up in New Orleans because he has a lot of connections there, and they'll be looking for a head coach as well, and that's a little bit more stable.
All right, so we threw out who's going to be the Jets head coach next year. Let's talk about the draft at Week 11. Why not, okay? It's obviously too early to talk about it, but the Jets will likely be getting top 5, top 10 pick. What are the Jets going to be looking for in 2025 in the NFL draft? Joe, what do you think?
I mean, look, they should be considering drafting a quarterback, but it's not the best year to be drafting a quarterback. It's going to depend are they picking top 5? Are they picking top 10, as you said? Cam Ward seems to be the leader in the clubhouse right now, as the exception of a guy you would spend a high first-round pick on. There's going to be a lot of teams who want a quarterback towards the top of the draft. Are the Jets going to land in the right spot to do that? Or are they going to be a little further down? And then if that happens, they need defensive line help. I know Jet fans hate taking defensive linemen in the first round, but they do really need help there. You'll never hear anyone complain about them drafting an offensive lineman in the first round. We'll see what happens with Devontae, pending what happens with Rodgers. I'm not sure I see them going receiver that high. Everyone will be talking about quarterback, though. And, should they look at Ward? Should they look at Sanders? Should they look at Ewers if they're picking later in the first round? There's not, again, it's much like head coach and like coordinator roulette. There's not a perfect answer here. Jet fans, I think, would have been miserable if they took Bo Nix, and now you look at Bo Nix and he threw for 400 yards and 4 touchdowns, a couple this past game. So you never really know with what these quarterback classes turn out to be. The year they drafted Zach Wilson, it was supposed to be an all-time quarterback class, and all these guys stink now, inclusive of Trevor Lawrence, who we all wanted them to go to 0-16 for. So if they're picking high enough, I do think there's excitement in taking a new face of the franchise and in taking a new quarterback. Too early to say that that's going to happen because, like Connor said, they could still go 6-11 and be picking 14th. And then are they going to take a guy at that spot? I don't necessarily know. I will say Connor Rodgers does have me particularly excited about Cam Ward. Again, he's further ahead on all this draft research than most of us because that's what he does. But could you get him in a top 10 scenario? Would that be something I think Jet fans can get excited about? A new head coach, a new GM, a totally new, fresh start? Sure. And you're really in time as a flat circle where you had Favre in 2008, started fresh with Rex and Sanchez in the AFC Championship game 2 years in a row. It wasn't because of Sanchez, but you post-Packers quarterback, could they go a similar route again?
All right, well, Connor, speaking of quarterbacks and quarterbacks the Jets have taken in the draft, last year, 5th-round pick, Jordan Travis. What do you see, what have you hearing about him and what people in the Jets organization are saying about him? Could he be the next quarterback?
No, I don't know about that, but that's it threw me for a loop on that one. So with Travis, I remember talking to people right after the draft about where the Jets had him graded had he not gotten hurt, and they thought that he was going to be a 3rd-round pick, potentially late 2nd. He could have snuck in there if he had continued to play pretty well, and maybe he got them to the playoffs or something along those lines. But he definitely was a prospect that they liked. I get tweeted about this, and I get Instagram DMs about Jordan Travis all the time. He hasn't practiced. So you're talking about a rookie that missed the tail end of his college season because of an ugly injury. He did not do rookie minicamp. He did not do OTAs. He did not do training camp. He has not practiced at all. It really is just a redshirt year for this guy to hopefully then get him back next spring and summer and see what he can't do. But I think it would almost be malpractice to throw him out there in any way, shape, or form just because, guys, he hasn't done anything. It'd be one thing if he was just practicing their 3rd-string quarterback, taking scout team reps and throwing on the side of the field. He hasn't done anything. So it would just be really, really poor judgment to throw him out there in any way, shape, or form.
All right, now let's have a little fun to wrap up this podcast because what else can we do? All right, so the Jets are now 3-8. The New York, New Jersey rival, the Giants, are 2-8, and they just benched their quarterback, Daniel Jones. If you combine the two teams, coaches included, Would this super team beat the 9-2 Buffalo Bills, and would they make the Super Bowl? Joe, I'm putting you on the spot first.
They definitely wouldn't make the Super Bowl. I don't think they'd beat the Bills either.
Would they make the playoffs? Would they make the playoffs?
It's probably an 8-9 team that narrowly misses the playoffs, I would say. It's not pretty across the board for both the New York teams at this moment. It's just there's a bad energy around both of them. So I think it's an 8-9 team. You know, you have a much better defensive line with what the Giants are bringing to the table with some of what the Jets have, but it's ugly. And let's hope we can get back to the times where both these teams were competitive. But even combining them, they're both pretty damn far away right now.
I don't know, dude. I'm optimistic of it. I kind of like the outlook. Somebody asked me about this in a mailbag because you got Rodgers at quarterback, Breece Hall at running back, Garrett Wilson, Malik Neighbors, Wan'Dale Robinson receivers, Tyler Conklin, left tackle Andrew, assuming everybody's healthy. So we're taking IR out of this. So you got Andrew Thomas, Elijah Vera Tucker, Joe Tittman, John Runyon then, right? And then Morgan Moses. I think that offense can score points. I mean, Brian Daboll's calling the plays for damn sure. Like that, where the Jets' offensive staff.
Is he forcing Rodgers to throw down the field to Neighbors at all?
I think so. Yes. Oh, yeah, I think so. Yeah. I think so. I think he'd actually, give him a little bit something like Josh Allen. And then defense, like, yeah, you get some more meat in there. You put Quinnen Williams next. You're going to run the 43, right? I think we're going to do that. It just fits them better. But you got Will McDonald and Brian Burns. You got Quinnen Williams, Dexter Lawrence. Bobby Okereke and Quincy Williams, I think, is a pretty good pairing right there. And then, well, you're screwed at safety because the Giants' safeties are just as bad as the Jets. But then secondary is probably pretty good with the Jets' three corners. Not going to take any of the Giants, but Jets' three corners. Maybe Drew Phillips works in there as well. But yeah, I think that team can make the playoffs. If you put them in the AFC, they definitely can. They can be better than the Broncos. Yeah, not the NFC. They'll make it in the AFC. No, they're not winning the division, but they can get in. They should get it. I mean, they're probably going to have a team that loses like is 10-7 in that seventh spot, that seventh wild card. I think it can get in. And who knows? Once you're in the playoffs, anything can happen.
All right, since Connor's a half glass full guy right now, I'm always a half glass full girl. Let's do something positive, okay? Give me one positive thing. It can be about this season or next season you see with the Jets. I don't even care who goes first.
I will say Breece Hall is still awesome. Right? How easy did he make that touchdown look yesterday? It looked like he was playing like a peewee team. And he has a play like that once every few weeks where you're like, God damn, this guy's so good. Can we get him the ball in space more? Like, look how easy he scored that touchdown. And I know fans are not crazy about paying a running back long term, but he's a really unique talent. And I'd really like to see him in a normal offense because he took over that game yesterday. And like, can we get one game where he gets 20 carries? Hasn't happened yet this year. Can we have one game where he gets 20 carries for like 210 yards and just goes insane? So that's a positive.
I heard you go on that rant on Badlands, Joe, and I remember sitting there thinking back to a conversation I had with someone really, really high up within the Jets organization, and they were talking to me about the offense, and they said this team's going to run through Breece Hall. Like that's what they said in August, and I was like, wow, okay, yeah. Like he's going to feast them, and maybe it won't be. It's going to be 30 touches a game, like not necessarily 30 carries, but they knew he was a receiver too. They were going to be throwing to him, running to him. I don't know where they lost that. I don't know where it all left. I don't. But one positive thing about the Jets is I've covered a lot of rebuilds here. I covered the 2015 one where Mike McCagnon took over for John Idzik, and I thought that roster was pretty barren of talent. Covered the one where Joe Douglas took over for Mike McCagnon, and that was barren of talent. Covered the one where the Jets blew it up in 2016 with Mike McCagnon. That was bare talent. This time, the new general manager, the new coach, all that stuff, there is at least a nucleus of players that you can be excited about, assuming the Jets can keep them all. I mean, Breece Hall, Garrett Wilson, Sauce Gardner, some of the guys on the defensive line with Will McDonald, Jermaine Johnson, Quincy Williams, somebody there, Michael Carter already paid. I mean, the team's not perfect, but I genuinely believe that when you look at the Jets roster, I still think it's a good team. I think they're just held back by coaching, specifically on the offensive side, and that's really what's hurting them. It's not a talent player issue completely. I genuinely believe the Jets, they're not perfect. They still need stuff. There's a lot of veterans that are going to be gone after the year, but you're not starting from square one. You're a few steps ahead of the equation.
And you got some real, like you said, really good, solid foundational pieces. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if they can keep them and they don't want to request trades, but yeah.
Yeah, well, I'm thinking.
Wait, that's negative. That's negative. We're not doing that. We're not doing that. Sorry, we're not doing that. Yeah.
Come on, I liked it when you talked about drinking, Connor.
Yeah, that's next week. Yeah.
That's what I like. Hey, Joe, it's a blast. Speaking of drinking, what's in that mug, by the way?
Bree actually made coffee. Bree did this like little variation of coffee. It's got like a little salt, vanilla, and brown sugar in it. like with black coffee. So she like made it when she did the grounds. It took away. She said it like takes away a lot of bitterness. It's really good. I'm actually really impressed with it. She makes a good cup of coffee. She doesn't know, like, not every morning I wake up, I'm like, can you make coffee? Because she doesn't drink it. I'm the only one who does.
Shocking. Connor's making Bree dress him, cook for him, make his coffee. Connor's winning at life.
I'd be lost without her, man.
Connor's definitely winning at life, Joe.
Yes, I'm jealous.
Right.
I didn't over here. God.
All right. Thank you all for joining us on this episode of Jets Final Drive. Again, listen to Jets Final Drive on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. We'll be off next week. Hey, that's a positive. It's bye week, guys.
Can't lose on bye week.
I'm celebrating my bye week watching the Giants. So whoopee.
Yeah, sorry about that, Connor.
Tommy DeVito.
I'm enjoying my bye week.
Tommy DeVito.
With your good coffee. We'll be off next week as the Jets get much needed bye week. But we will see you in 2 weeks to recap the Jets-Seahawks matchup. That's at 1 o'clock at MetLife. Again, another positive, all 1 o'clock games. For Connor Hughes and Joe Caporoso, I'm Jeane Coakley. Thanks for joining us. I love how I enunciate that.